All right, well, I'm here with Antonio Ramírez. He is the CEO of Pixel506. And we're going to be talking about how his company, Pixel506, was born and about entrepreneurship in general. So why don't you start off telling us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Thank you, Kat. This is great. I mean, I think we've been wanting to do this podcast for the longest time.
For a while, yeah.
And so first time, this is awesome. So, okay, Pixel506 was my thesis graduation project. I come up with the idea of doing a company that will share values and will connect people through technology in both Costa Rica and the US.
Where were you studying?
I was studying at New York University. I was doing my master's in digital media, business, and service design.
Good old NYU.
NYU, alma mater, yeah. So, so once I created the thesis, it was really, it was like a whole process. So thinking throughout that process, I was able to articulate a strategy for creating a company. And the university said, why don't you start this company at the incubator? And so at the time, I just created the company at the incubator. It's funny because at that time, I didn't know you can ask for money to investors. I didn't know you can raise money. I didn't know much about it. All I knew was that I have to go out and sell. Right? And by selling, I will have to do two things. I will need to get vendors that I will have to negotiate with them a better price, and I will need to get clients. And our first client was the university, so we started to provide services to the university specifically for like 2 years, and then we start growing to different industries. So we're in the education sector for a while, and then we moved into other industries.
So did you have this idea of this company before you started studying, or did you develop it totally at NYU?
Pixel506, the name Pixel we used before on t-shirts because we wanted to create like a surfing brand.
Who's we?
With myself and my wife. And we created a couple of t-shirts. We couldn't find the right printers, so we said, you know what, this is not for us. And at that same moment, we moved to New York, from Costa Rica to New York, and we started, we put everything on hold, and then we just went to university, I guess. Mm-hmm. But then after that, when we started to do, at that time it was just me, just doing the thesis. It was like, okay, this is a cool name, but we repurposed the name.
And
makes sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's really cool to hear like the baby stories of companies. Like, how long did you have it kind of floating around in your head? I mean, not just the name, but like the whole idea. Like, you talk about selling. I mean, did you want to make the company, like what was your dream for it? I mean, what was that first, before you knew anything about business, what was your dream for it?
I've been always driven to understand culture and to understand what moves people. And for the longest time, I had a fascination into why brands speak to an audience, or why brands will connect to certain audiences. And so I read a lot of books about it. For many years, I was into branding. I'm still am, but for the longest time, that was it. That was my focus. I wanted to understand why you will connect with Apple or with something else, right? So launching Pixel was, let's not care about technology, because I was hanging out with a bunch of geeks and all they talk about is plugins and the new WordPress and PHP and whatnot. And I'm an engineer. That was my first career as a software engineer. So my discussions with these guys was, okay, what happens if you have all this technology but you cannot communicate the technology to the user, right? You can have amazing PHP, you can have amazing backend application, but if you cannot communicate to the user at a different level, then your application is dead. And many discussions after I specialized myself into what at the time was called graphic user interface and design centric. And after that, I merged design of interfaces with brands and connecting the two with software. We saw it was a really powerful idea, and that's when Pixel was born, really.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you feel like you're more of an engineer or a designer or a businessman?
Businessman.
Not that there's anyone that's better than the other or means anything, but I
Right.
mean, at what point did you consider yourself an entrepreneur? I mean, what was the point where you said, I am now an entrepreneur?
You know what's funny? I never thought of it.
No?
It's not like I call myself an entrepreneur. My LinkedIn profile never said I was an entrepreneur. I'm just a doer. I just do things.
But do you think that what you're doing is entrepreneuring?
100%. But at the time, I didn't want to put a title to it because it was more like. So there's a couple of things that happen that make me do the switch. And what happened was, it was 2008. I was right out of school in the worst time in the USA, right?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Before I went to New York, I had all these jobs aligned that, you know, like once I graduate college or grad school, I will go into Yahoo or Google or banks or, you know, like Morgan Stanley or whatever. So I had many friends in different industries, and that was it. I was set, right? Then 2008 happened. I had to talk to my professor, and I had to say, hey, you know what? I need you to extend my thesis time because if I graduate right now, that's it. I'm done, right? Yeah. Everybody's getting laid off, etc. So, but then I thought, you know what? It's easier for somebody to hire me without any benefits, and I just charge per hour, than trying to land a job.
Right,
and
with a
to
salary,
get a salary and visas and all that stuff, right? So, and that's how I started to approach people. But it was out of necessity. I wouldn't say it was that, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm just gonna do something. I was like, I'm gonna go out, sell, and I'm gonna make a living because I have to pay my rent and because I have to provide.
Do you think it's more effective when people are entrepreneurs out of necessity than out of a cool idea?
Yeah, 100. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Why?
Because you create.
Because a lot of guys with cool ideas might argue with you.
True. Well, have they been able to develop their cool ideas?
I mean, that's the question, right?
Well, that's the question, yeah. But if you look in the history of entrepreneurship, most of these guys, the ones that are succeeding, they did it out of a chance or out of necessity, or something in them changed. It's not that they thought, wow, this is cool, I'm gonna do it. It's more like, I need to provide, I need to create something. And most of the time, they've been doers, right? Probably because of my upbringing, it was easier for me to know that, you know, I have to go out and negotiate things, calculate margins, and provide a service, right?
So what would be some
Did I answer your question?
tips? Yeah, no, you did. It's a question that doesn't have an answer, right? It's not an exact science.
I will say this: when somebody says I have a cool idea, everybody has cool ideas. That's my point.
Yeah.
Executing the idea is super hard.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, look, Pixel, great idea. It's been 8 years, right? And now we have.
Yeah.
Now we're starting to see.
Right. Well,
the idea.
What would be your advice for those guys with cool ideas? Since you have gone through the entrepreneur, whatever the reason you started was, what would be like some advice for those guys and girls with cool ideas?
Yeah, so as I was saying in a previous conversation, I think is study a lot even though you go to school, to me, you have to do three things. One is learn how to sell with ethics. Right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, the thing is, when you tell somebody that they should become a salesperson first, sales has a very bad connotation in the market in general, because people think salesman is, or the salesmanship is not a career. Right? It's not
like a plan B.
Yeah, it's like, well, I didn't have anything to do, so I'm going into
But you're
sales.
saying that's not accurate.
It's not accurate. The thing is, people don't have the information they need to learn how to sell. They don't study sales, and basically they're usually in any job in sales, they tell the employee, here, go sell this thing, no training, nothing. They don't know how to do cold calling, they don't know how to manage a client, they don't know how to set up expectations, etc.
So what's the right way to sell? I mean, in your opinion?
To me, you have to do some training, at least, right? Read some books about training, learn how to negotiate, learn how to articulate your ideas and set the expectations for the client. So that's one thing. While you start in sales, you should go into read books a lot. I read about financing, mergers and acquisitions, sales, how to be a better leader, how to communicate better. You know, like, it's not self-help, but like other entrepreneurs, right? Like you just keep reading and reading, like where the market is going, newspapers, ads, you know, like all sorts of content that you can grab to be in the know.
What about, I've heard a term floating around. What about selling without letting people know that you're selling? How do you feel about that kind of idea? Like not the hard sell, but the subtle sell.
Yeah, so there's two, and I had to learn this myself, right? So it's not like there's no born salesperson. Right? People learn how to sell.
Okay.
It's a skill, it's a natural skill, right? So if I'm telling you about my service and products in a soft way, that's fine, right? Because what I want is to educate you so you buy from me, right? But I'm providing a lot of value, and that's why you're buying from me, right?
Okay, so you're selling something that I actually
It's not that
need, not just
exactly like selling. What's the saying? Selling ice to Eskimos.
yeah, right.
Right? That to me, that's not ethical. Why do you want to sell somebody something they don't need?
Okay, well then how do you find the people who
Because
need
that's why
what
you
you're selling?
that's why you do prospecting. That's why you ask questions, right? When I sit with the client, I ask questions. I say, and we had it here in the company. Like we have people that they came here like, oh, I want to create my app. Okay, what's the app about? Blah 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 blah, right? And so, do you think you need that app, or can you create first? Okay. We need to cut that part. I'm gonna go back to a story. It just popped in my head.
Okay.
Okay. Nice. That's fun. Okay. So to your question is this: the way we sell by not selling is this: you ask questions. You need to understand what the person actually needs, not what they think they need. Is what you know they need, right? So for that, you need to develop a lot of skills. But for example, the other day I was talking to this guy. He has a real estate website. He wants to create an app, and some guys are trying to sell him on the idea that he needs to create a native iOS Android app that is going to cost him $50,000, right? And that he must create an app. When I talked to him, and this was totally random. I was just looking at a car, and then the guy approached me, and then we started talking about apps.
Was he a car salesman?
He was a car salesman. He really was trying to sell. But anyway, so when I talked to the guy, I said, look, how much traffic do you have on your website? Like 500 people come to my website. Don't create an app. You're gonna waste $50,000 on an app, and you don't even have traffic on your website. So by me guiding the guy into what's next, because I told him, I'm like, instead of putting $50,000 towards an app, put $1,000 towards ads on Facebook or LinkedIn or Google, right? And drive audience first. And once you get an audience, then go and create the app.
Even though you could have made the $50,000
Exactly.
on the app.
But it would have been, I would have felt bad because it's not the right thing to do,
Okay.
right? I could have told him, yeah, don't do it with those guys, do it with us. But why should I do that, right? So that's one example.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So he will be a client at some point.
You also build that rapport, right? You build that
Yeah.
trust that you're looking out for the best of
You
what
hit
you
in the
need.
head.
Yeah.
You need to build trust. And by providing content, by providing information to the client or to the prospect, you can generate trust in the person. And they will buy from you at some point, right? Maybe not that day, maybe in 5 years, or maybe never. But I much rather have him in 5 years than yesterday and rip him off. Right?
Well, that's been, I mean, we could go on forever about this. I'm pretty
I know.
sure we could
And we
just
should.
go on and on and on about it. I guess that'll be the next time, right?
Yeah.
So,
Podcast number 2, you mean?
yeah, podcast number 2, number 3.
Exactly. Number 506.
Exactly.
All right.
Well, that's been great. Thanks for chatting about how we started, about how you started Pixel and kind of your ideas about entrepreneurship and what it means to be an ethical salesman. I think that's a message that a lot of people can benefit from.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're going to continue providing more content as long as we go, right?
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.